Have you thought about what it would mean for Ohio State to add a third running back in their 2024 recruiting class? A week ago during our recruiting update, I thought it wouldn't happen. But upon further review, my thought has changed.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes for the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, April 26th in the year 2023, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. During today's episode, John Garcia Jr. is back with us once again. John is Locked On's football recruiting insider. John and I go over why Ohio State will add a third running back in their 2024 recruiting class. We highlight four-star running back Taylor Tatum from the state of Texas, and also a running back Jordan Lyle, who put Ohio State in his Final Five. John and I also go over why Bryce West is a top priority at corner for the Buckeyes in this recruiting class. John also lets us know who he thinks will select C.J. Stroud in the first round of the NFL Draft, which begins tomorrow. There's a lot of good stuff from John during today's show. You don't want to miss it. And after we had John Garcia Jr. on the show last week, I thought we would not talk about a running back recruit for quite a long time. However, that changed as not one but two recruits put Ohio State in their final grouping. Here to talk about all the good stuff going on the recruiting show with the Ohio State Buckeyes is our guy, John Garcia Jr. John is Locked On's football recruiting insider. John, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back on with you, Jay. Never dull when we're talking Bucks.
Never dull at all. And I want to set this up a little bit different than normal because, like I mentioned last week, we talked a little bit about the recruiting, how Sam Williams-Dixon, recent commit, views James Peoples, another running back commitment. So Ohio State currently has two running backs committed in their 2024 recruiting class. And I was very clear last week that I thought the Buckeyes were done going after running backs. And then there's this really talented young man. He's really fast as well. Taylor Tatum, running back from Longview, Texas, Longview High School, who put Ohio State in his top 7. And that piqued my interest because of the conversation last week. But I also saw a recruiting database has this young man as the number 2 ranked running back in the entire country, the 6th best recruit in the hotbed state of Texas. John, I opened up a little bit different because I don't know if you thought you and I would talk about a running back this quickly after last week's show.
I didn't. I thought 2 was the goal. We saw Ohio State pivot so quickly after Marshall left the state for Michigan and grabbing Peoples and then keeping Williams-Dixon within state lines. You felt like, hey, grab the local kid, a perfect way to put a bow on the position. But clearly, Tony Alford not only still has it, which I think nobody questioned, but clearly Ohio State wants a third back because kids aren't going to just throw an Ohio State logo on there because it's cool and 5 stars go there. When you're a Jordan Lyle or certainly a Taylor Tatum and you're elite, you're not throwing a team's logo on there as a courtesy. These are schools legitimately courting you. And Tatum was just on campus last weekend, right? You know, usually you get to the spring game and it's like everyone pauses after that for recruiting and it's about coaches going on the road, not so much about hosting recruits. Tony Alford hosted Taylor Tatum, and it was his first visit to Columbus. Obviously, things went well there because I think the next day after he got back to Texas, he puts out the top group that now has Ohio State in it. And by the way, Michigan was kind of the early favorite for Tatum before they took Jordan Marshall. So the running back dominoes, we don't talk about running back dominoes, but they're at play here. And now I think that the schools in Texas probably feel better about Tatum, Texas A&M, et cetera. So fascinating to see this development. And then Jordan Lyle does the same thing out of St. Thomas Aquinas, home of the Bosa brothers, of course, and many other former Ohio State Buckeyes. So here we go. Clearly the plan here is to take 3 backs. And I think we've talked about how Ohio State's going to have a very big class from a volume perspective. And clearly 3 running backs is going to be a part of it now. It doesn't mean that they're the favorite for either Tatum or Lyle. I think Tatum, that first visit piqued his interest. So now you try to grab an official visit and kind of go from there. Lyle was on campus in March for his first Columbus experience and really enjoyed it, as many Broward County natives do. So you'd like to see the Buckeyes be in play for 2 very different backs. And I think 2 very patient timelines. I'm not sure either guy is on the brink of a verbal commitment, which is good news because Ohio State hasn't been pegged with these 2 for very long. But Tatum in particular, fresh off the visit, you'd like to see how much of an impact Columbus, the culture, Ryan Day, Tony Alford, Brian Hartline, everybody can have on a prospect that is making a trip, even as an underdog, which is kind of a rare place for OSU to be in for any recruit. But you understand why things can change in a hurry when that program does really start to push and prioritize.
John, you said something earlier that I do believe it sparks an interest or a conversation you and I had last recruiting cycle regarding Larry Johnson. Ohio State, many people are saying Larry Johnson's losing it. Larry Johnson can't get it done. Larry Johnson might be on the brink of retirement. Like, these are things that I saw on Twitter and I heard people discuss about Larry Johnson because Ohio State missed out on really talented defensive ends. I don't think Larry Johnson has lost it at all. I think, like you said, you win some, you lose some. Tony Alford definitely has not lost it. And if Ohio State has a desire to get 3 running backs in this recruiting cycle, in this recruiting class, I believe Tony Alford, 1, he can get it done, but 2, he can stockpile a trio of running backs that are really real. I mean, think about how many schools out there would love to have James Peoples on the recruiting class, but then you add in James Peoples and possibly Tatum at the same time. Most schools in the country would literally drool if that was a possibility. It's a possibility at Ohio State. I think Buckeye fans, the number 3 running backs might surprise them. But also, John, I think Buckeye fans have a belief in Tony Alford that he can get this job done. I don't know where he's landing. I have no idea. His top 7, let me go over this quickly. You mentioned Michigan, USC, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Georgia. I mean, you're talking about blue bloods. You're talking about the best programs in the country. You expect Ohio State to be in this mix. 2 running back commitments, great. I still think there's a good chance Tony Alford locks in 3 running backs in this recruiting class, and it very well could be Taylor Tatum. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me because Tony Alford can still get it done.
Yeah, and look, you've got an upper class laden running back group on campus right now, obviously, and clearly Alford and Day and the whole coaching staff is expecting guys getting their last season in at Ohio State, whether that means it's about the NFL or honestly maybe the portal for some of those other backs that we're not talking about as much among the Ohio State stars. So they're preparing, and we see running back as a different position now. 1, it's about a committee. It's about putting a group together, and 2, it's also one of the positions where we get instant impact. There's a lot of programs that will rely on freshman backs to be, if not the bell cow, the complement to the lead back in a rotation without hesitation across the country. Ohio State's done so as well. Look at Dallin Hayden last year. Wasn't expected to be that guy, but had to step up and become that guy, much like Henderson as a true freshman the year before. So that's something that is really fascinating about the running back position. And I think recruits there also understand that. We talked to Sam Williams-Dixon when he committed to Ohio State, and like you said, he was complimenting Peoples the whole time. There's already that peripheral of, I don't have to be the 25 carry a game guy. Eddie George, Archie Griff, that stuff just doesn't hit. Even Zeke Elliott, that style is fewer and farther in between now. Even your Doak Walker Award winners aren't carrying the ball 30 times a game like they were 10, 15 years ago. So I do think that's an understanding that is viewed as a good thing from the Ohio State perspective. And clearly Alford is communicating that to not only the current commitments, but a group of running backs that aren't committed and saying, hey, there's still room here. we're going to be a huge committee and we're all going to eat, as they say. So I think that's a fascinating and not easy thing to do. We've seen a lot of schools bring in two backs and try to view them very differently, Thunder and Lightning, or however you want to put it. But three is a lot more rare. That's a Georgia, Alabama kind of deal. So to be in that conversation is frankly where Ohio State belongs, and certainly where Ohio State believes it is.
John, we spend a lot of time talking about why this makes sense for Ohio State to keep going after a running back, but we have a talented young man in Taylor Tatum, Texas, Longview, Texas. I can't get over just the thought that Ohio State can keep going down to Texas and take these talented guys away from the Longhorns. I mean, that makes me excited knowing the Buckeyes could keep doing this year after year after year. But you got a young man, he's a multi-sport athlete, plays baseball. He's an outfielder, second baseman, and a relief pitcher. He runs track, I saw via his Twitter page, ran 21.7 to 200 meters, buddy. That's moving. Yep. He also was a second leg on the 4x1, the 4x2. So you're thinking like a speed guy, a track guy that's out there, and he can just breakaway speed. He has it on the football field, but he's very sturdy as well. I saw 5'10", 5'11", maybe 205 pounds. So you're carrying that frame. You have the speed. That speed translates to the football field. But, John, also it's hard to bring this bad boy down. So you got the speed, you got the multi-sport athlete, and you got, like, the body and the frame. He's probably going to add 10 to 15 pounds to a frame that's already pretty sturdy and solid. It makes sense why Ohio State is potentially going to add a third running back, and it could be Taylor Tatum.
Yeah, get this, Jay. He is known as a speed guy, as you mentioned. And in terms of what he's listed at, on the databases, he's the biggest back that Ohio State is courting between Williams-Dixon and Peoples. They're all similar. They're all between 5'10" and 6 foot, 185 and 200 pounds. But Tatum is listed above 200 pounds right now. So I think that's really fascinating to consider. And you throw on the tape and you get a lot of that. High-end speed, doesn't get caught from behind, and very productive out of the backfield as a pass catcher, which is a lot of what we said about those other two. So clearly,
yes, sir,
it's not about creating that variance in Thunder and Lightning or guys who are sort of opposites. It's about, hey, this is the system. We're running a spread. It's wide open. We need guys who are instinctive and can hit that home run. And all the two commits, and both Tatum and Lyle have that in their bag as uncommitted guys, which is why they're both so coveted among the most in the country at the position. So Ohio State is developing, I think, a new type of running back to covet, and all these guys profile as guys who are fast enough to hit the home run, versatile enough to catch the football, but also thick enough to take some of the extra reps that it does take when one of these guys gets hot. Because when it's a committee, it's great if everyone's getting 7 or 8 carries, but typically one guy gets hot and you sort of ride the hot hand. But they have the frame to support that if and when that time does come in a big game against Michigan or Penn State or whoever.
And I did see, for those of you that watch high school football during the season, I did see there are some games from Longview High School that are actually on YouTube. So if you want to go back and watch not just the highlights, but a full game, search Longview High School football. I just searched Taylor Tatum, and some of the games came up. So you can get a full game's worth of him in the backfield, which I think will give you a better grasp about what kind of football player he is. But, John, we talk about production, talk about how he is on the football field, the speedster, the sturdy frame, the heaviest of the two current commitments, and Tatum, he's the heaviest of the three in the recruiting databases. He was productive last year, 227 rushing yards, over 227 carries, almost 1,900 rushing yards, 1,891, 33 rushing touchdowns. That's, to me, still unheard. Like, it still blows my mind that cats can run that many yards, have that many yards, and have that many touchdowns in high school. Like, as we see, I've seen Derrick Henry's like high school stats, and that still blows my mind. But this is insane. But I also believe what you said earlier, how if you have 2 or 3 guys in a recruiting class, the 25, 28, 30 carries a game, you're not doing that in Ohio State. So he can ultimately do this in high school one more time, come to whatever college, maybe Ohio State, maybe lower his carries per game and preserve his body for the National Football League. So he can have another heavy workload. but still be excited about potentially being a Buckeye, being coached by Tony Alford, having a lesser workload, still being highly productive in the offense, and being developed as a guy who can be a really good pro.
That's something that is a huge change in feel for the up and coming running back recruit. A lot of them don't want to be the 30 carry guy. They'll do it if they have to, but they want to preserve because there's still a short shelf life for that position relative to transitioning from college to the NFL. So I think, again, you can sell that as, hey, we've done it before and we want to do it with you now. And that's something that will resonate with a lot of prospects, especially in a spread offense, right? Because you're doing things that are a little bit less conventional. You're not blocking as much. You might leak out as a receiver, which, again, all these guys are comfortable with, especially Tatum. I think of the three, he might be the most comfortable with the ball in the air, although all three are comfortable with the ball in the air. You might be able to do a couple more things because now you're not asked to be that bell cow guy. And that also creates an opportunity where you can get these guys on the field together. I know we didn't see it a lot last year with Ohio State because everyone was banged up. The entire running back room was banged up. But in theory, you get a Mayan Williams next to a Trevion Henderson, each flanking a CJ Stroud. And what kind of threat does that present to the defense? Those are elements of the spread game that I think helps to bring in multiple backs in the same cycle, even though all of them are incredibly productive and blue chips and all of those things. So it's something that Ohio State has already done, and I think will continue to do clearly in this cycle and beyond.
Who do you think, if you had to put him, so we saw his top 7, if you had to put a 3 as far as who you think has the upper hand of his recruitment right now, I'm not asking you to rank them, but how would you put maybe a grouping of 3 of these 3 schools are kind of at the top of the recruitment right now?
Yeah, I think he's been at Texas A&M the most. Okay. And like I said, there was a little Michigan buzz for him coming into the year, but then they took Marshall and are looking at other guys. So I think that's helping the in-state schools. And Texas is trending for a couple other guys. So A&M might be this sneaky school on this list. Stylistically, you like the fit at Ohio State and Oklahoma relative to him being known as a home run hitting 3-down back. So I think both of those schools have to feel pretty good about their chances as well. But it's kind of similar across the board. Every school on the list either already has one or more running back commitments or they're trending for some other, running back commitments. So I do think there's a long way to go in this battle, and official visits are going to be sort of that next layer to dissect relative to Taylor Tatum, who, again, had some Michigan buzz. We know Oklahoma's going to get an official. I think USC is going to get an official visit as well. So the Trojans can be sneaky in this race in the longer it goes there as well. But Ohio State has been sort of working from the back of the pack just logistically because they hadn't received a visit. But now that box is checked and they could start making up ground on some of these other schools.
John, we have had a question that's come up at the end of numerous shows. Who could be the next player or players to commit to Ohio State? And Bryce West has come up, Aaron Scott's come up, Aaron Nolan came up, Sam William Dixon's came up. So we've had a lot of guys, some in-state guys, Aaron Nolan down south, but we've had a lot of this question come up numerous times. And I believe there were, I want to say twice, Bryce West, Aaron Scott came up as possible guys who could be the next players to commit to Ohio State. Bryce West, an in-state kid from Cleveland out of Glenville High School. And I have seen a push lately of more players from this high school being recruited in-state by Ohio State, but also outside of that as well. I think you and I are about the same age. I don't know your age. I'm 34. And so when I was growing up, Glenville was like, I was an Ohio State fan as well. Glenville was a school, like there was like a hotbed of, and they produced and developed numerous elite players that play college football at an elite level. So I hope that comes again. But also Cleveland, it makes sense. But you keep harping on this young man and his talent. Why is he always on your mind, and why do you think he might commit to Ohio State soon?
Because he's the best defensive player in Ohio, might be the best recruit in Ohio. No disrespect to anybody out there, but this is a game-changing recruit at a premium position. We talk about pass rushers and quarterbacks, obviously, but look, if you can play corner and you can flip your hips and run and play the football, you're going to have a chance to make a lot of money one day. And Bryce West just profiles as one of these types of guys, Jay. 6 foot, 180 pounds, 700-meter dash, making plays at Cleveland Glenville, as you mentioned, playing for Ted Ginn Sr., and just ultra productive, an all-American type defensive back who might be the best football recruit in the state of Ohio. I know you can't win all the battles in the state, but if you've got a position of need like corner is, and he's in your state at that program, that profiles pretty well if you can grab him, and it will profile pretty negatively if you don't go grab him. So I just think Bryce West, especially now that you've got QB1 figured out with Aaron Olin after the Dylan Raiola situation, you got your offensive skill players are in great shape. You got to grab some defenders, and you'll probably go D-line first, but cornerback has to be one of the next orders of business thereafter. And Bryce West not only is maybe the best cornerback in Ohio, he may be the best in the entire Midwest and is one of the best in America. So when you've got that guy in your backyard, he becomes a bigger priority, even though he's already a Glenville guy. He's already at that premium cornerback position, and he's upping his stock. That 10-7, he just ran it in April, right? So he is proving that he does have the wheels to compete against the Jeremiah Smiths and Mylan Grahams that he might face one day in practice. And him getting back to Columbus for the spring game, I think, was really big. I think there was a little bit of, will he be the next big recruit to leave the state kind of vibes? Just a little bit, just hints, rumors, just a touch of that. Oregon, Michigan, a lot of schools were starting to feel decent about their chances to pull him out of Ohio. But since he finished his spring back in Columbus, back at the shoe, there's kind of a reaffirmation that, it's going to be tough to pull him out of state. Ohio State is going to be that team to beat. And the other commitments are certainly pushing for that. I think he's probably the guy that the commitment group chat is pushing for the most. Hey, Bryce, let's get you in this thing, commit to Ohio State, get it done. And there's not a whole lot planned for Bryce. We haven't heard a lot about official visits. We haven't heard a lot about a window for a decision to have been made, which is typically really good news for the team that is the perceived favorite. And Ohio State has been that. It's if he has set an official, that's the only one he's set. I mean, there's a lot of signs and tea leaves pointing to Ohio State in this recruitment, not to mention how important that is perceptually. We talked about it before. Position of need, the school, maybe one of these schools that you bring up in the state of Ohio that you got to win from a recruiting standpoint. He profiles as a very important recruit in this class, and you just get the sense Ohio State's not going to let that slip between their grasp.
Speaking of not letting it slip within their grasp, I went back, John, and saw some things numbers-wise. Well, one wasn't a number. Well, it was a very low number, actually, of what Bryce West did during this most recent football season, but also kind of how Ohio State's viewing him. This young man didn't allow a touchdown last year as a junior. He had 4 interceptions. Team went 15-0 when they won state. Very good overall team accomplishment, not just winning state, but going undefeated, but also the 4 interceptions, but not allowing the touchdown. Like INTs, I think, John, sometimes get inflated, kind of get looked at it a different way. If I'm breaking the pass up, if I'm messing you up your route, or if I'm not allowing a touchdown, I'm doing something right. And so the 4 interceptions is great, but I would put more emphasis on him not allowing a touchdown as a junior. But Ohio State, how are they viewing him, John? I read that he's a top in-state, not just top recruit overall, but he's a top in-state recruit. He's a top priority at corner. And so the emphasis is there and talk about maybe he'll get outside of the border and maybe he'll go elsewhere. And they kind of had to fine-tune that thing. It makes sense if he's your top player at a position and he's inside the state, he's your top recruit in state, you got to make it happen. And I'm starting to believe, John, it will happen probably sooner. Like you keep saying it's probably going to happen soon. I'm starting to believe that as well. I think it can literally happen next week or so. Because I follow Devontae or Deontay, one of the Armstrong twins, and they keep getting me excited about, if somebody else is going to commit or the group chat you talk about. Come on, make this happen. I think it's going to happen soon. And I think once that happens, you can get Aaron Scott to commit. You can get another defensive player to commit. And so this the steam that the Buckeyes have picked up on the recruiting trail, it could keep on moving, keep on going swiftly, and they could be riding hot into the month of June, which would be full of official visits. So I think it'll happen soon because Ohio State has put a priority, not just in state, but also as him being the top priority at the position that Bryce West plays.
100% agree with you. I think this is Ohio State's race to lose. And you know, there's a need. There's a need for volume and star power in the secondary. So West can get you going in both of those directions. And look, Aaron Scott, you know, is being pitched as a potential complement to West. Reggie Powers is a hard-hitting box safety that is also an Ohio native, all three of them. So you could theoretically kickstart the defensive class with three Ohio DBs. I mean, that's as Ohio State as it gets from where I sit. So yeah, I think this chase for the number one class, and look, it is the number one class on a couple outlets right now. This chase becomes a lot more real when you bring in 4- and 5-star defensive backs to start to complement the great offensive skill talent that you've already put out from a commitment perspective. So yeah, there's a lot to track with Ohio State recruiting, but that arrow is pointed up in terms of momentum, in terms of commitments. This run isn't quite over just yet.
John, I got two more questions for you. I know sometimes I say two more, it turns into 3 or 4, literally just 2 because we're almost up out of time. Who do you think will be the next players to commit to Ohio State?
I'm still going to stick with the Ohio trio of the secondary players.
Okay.
Got to be one of those 3, barring a surprise, in my opinion. I think some of the other priorities that we know about are just further away from making a decision, whether it's number 1 pass rusher Dylan Stewart, a guy like Josiah Trader from down in South Florida. All these guys are thinking November, December, maybe August at the earliest. I think the Ohio guys are a little bit closer to ending the process. So again, give me the combination of West, Aaron Scott, maybe a Reggie Powers in that group when Ohio State is ready to push for them. But again, either way, the momentum's clearly not quite done. And as you said, the commitments are teasing it at this point. So there's clearly a plan to stagger out some of these verbal commitments. And Ohio State's done a great job of that in March and April. So no reason to expect that to stop as we get to the end of the month.
Last thing for you, John, the draft is tomorrow. This is a Wednesday here on Locked on Buckeyes. The NFL draft, the first round, is tomorrow. Only one player. You could pick any other 32 NFL, well, 31, because one NFL team does not have a first-round pick. Right. Who do you think drafts C.J. Stroud tomorrow in the first round of the 2023 NFL draft?
I'm starting, the more I think about it, there's so much polarization with CJ right now. It feels like smokescreen city to me. So I don't think he lasts very long. I think he's the smokescreen. Hey, let's peg him down so we could grab him at picks 2, 3, or 4. So I'll just go chalk with it. I think Bryce Young probably goes number 1 to Carolina, and right there, Houston. Okay. I don't know that they need a guy like that. Playing indoors, all of that sounds really nice in what they want to do under new management there. So I don't think he lasts very long into that top 5, and certainly he should be taken. I can't believe I have to say it. He should be taken before an Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis at a minimum.
John, it's fun to have you on the show. Can't wait to do this once again next week. There's a good chance Bryce West will be committed between now and the time you and I get together about a week from now. So if you're trying to think about what we might talk about next time, it's probably a commitment. It could be from Bryce West or Aaron Scott. John, if you could let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter, if they want to keep up with any of the recruiting things going on, or maybe NFL draft, you'll be tweeting as well. Maybe they want to know what John is saying about the draft live, instantly reacting to what's going on. John, where can the people follow you?
Yeah, real simple. Just my name, John Garcia _JR across all social media.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. Like I mentioned, the draft is tomorrow. The next time we have John on the show, there might be a young man, a linebacker named Sammy Brown that might find his way into the show. I keep trying to do this with John. I keep telling him about it, but then there's more other news that comes up. I want to hear what John has to say about Sammy Brown and possibly him teaming up with Peyton Pierce at Ohio State. Sammy Brown has not committed as of yet. He could be, and if you get Pierce and Brown together at linebacker, it could be nasty for the opposing offenses. John, that's a look into next week. The draft is tomorrow. We had a great show today. Thanks for coming on the show. Locked on Buckeyes. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.